All right, so you're going to take this kind of ugly brown color of Edco steel siding, and we're going to try and make it look like our painted wall up here, kind of like a cedar tone, dual tone texture. And as you can see, we need some variety here, but the lucky thing here that we're dealing with is that we've got this kind of stamped in texture already that gives us a little bit of easier time graining along that and kind of blending those colors. And we can dry brush it afterwards to really pull out those highlight and depths if we want a more textured board. Or, like as you can see with some of these, we can just leave it as kind of a gradient. So we got our brush sitting in water here. Just shake off some of the extra water. And the nice thing is that there's no rules. As long as you're going along the length of the board, you're going to get something that looks like wood texture. And especially once you're looking at it from 10 feet away up on the wall, it doesn't need to be perfect. So I'm going to start here with my kind of an orangish brown tint. And we're just going to throw a little bit of it on there. If you want to come a little bit closer so you can see this. And right now it's pretty thin because my brush is wet. I'm just going to add a little bit more. You can work a little bit thinner because this is already painted. So this is just for aesthetic. We're not going for perfect coverage here. And now watch what happens. I'll dip my brush in the kind of orangish brown. We'll add a few spots here. And again, there's no rules to it. So you can kind of schlep it on however you want. And then you're going to take your brush and you're just going to go along the length of the board, and it will nicely blend that in here. And so you can make this as contrasted or as subtle as you want. So I kind of like to do a mix, some contrasted, some subtle. So I'm going to do the top half of this. It's brown here, and now I'm going to come back and dip in the orange. And I don't bother cleaning my brush between them. It doesn't matter. It's all going to get blended on the plank anyway. All right. And as you can see, it kind of feathers it in nicely as long as you're painting wet to wet. So we're going to do one pass of wet to wet paint where we're kind of mixing the oranges and the browns in kind of a vague pattern. The other thing you want to be careful is don't do everything with an arm's length brush stroke or it's going to be too uniform. So you want to do some of these brush strokes. You're taking the brush and you're just walking along the length of the board here. All right, so now that we've got our kind of undertones painted with kind of very gentle wet to wet painting, shading between the layers of wood texture, now we want to use these highlights on the grain here. If you can zoom in and see this, this is like a stamped steel product, and so we have this three-dimensional texture that we can use, and we can take a very light, I don't know, I want to say lightly painted brush, we would call dry brushing, and run it across the tops of these ridges, and it will pick up just at the tops of the ridges whatever color we want. So this is a darker board, so I'm going to use my lighter color paint to highlight this, and then we have a lighter board here, and then I'll use some of the darker color paint to pick up the highlights there. So let's do this dry brushing. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my bright orange paint here, and I'm just going to, on the board here, I'm just going to wipe this off like that. You want almost nothing on your brush. All right, and so we're going to take our brush at a very horizontal angle like this, because again, we don't want the bristles to go into the grooves. We want it to just hit the very tops of these ridges. Okay, and so we're just going to brush this right across the top there, and you can see that gives us this lovely kind of wood texture picking up on that stamped grain. Okay, and it doesn't have to be perfect again. You know, there are no rules here. Wood is a natural product, so we can just kind of lightly go across here. And again, you don't want to do too many short brush strokes like I'm doing. I'm just going to grab a little bit more paint. You do want to walk some of these down the board, but you will run out of paint quickly because it is dry brushing. Okay, so I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to come down a really long run here. And you'll see that my board isn't all the way dry, and it doesn't have to be. Okay, because you do want some of it to be feathered in a little bit, just like wood grain would naturally be coming in and out of the cut that you're dealing with. Okay, so we've got this one nicely wood grain. We've got a few heavier spots here, which is probably fine, a little bit more contrast. And now let's go to this board with our darker colors. So I'm going to get a little bit of my dark color paint. Okay, get it heavy on the brush, wipe it off, then get it mostly dry there. And now again, we'll take it at a horizontal angle here and we'll walk it down the board. Okay? And if you want to come at a little bit of an angle to scrape some of the paint off on those groove lines, then you can go like that, and you can see when you come at an angle, it will lift that paint into those grooves and you'll get a little bit more contrast when you do that. So you can swipe down at an angle like that. So that's how we're getting that done. And you can see you have to replenish your brush very frequently because it's nearly dry when you're doing it. So I'm going to come over here, grab a little bit more paint. Okay, wipe it off, and then we're just going to walk it down the board. And you can see here we got, when you first lay it down, sometimes you'll get it like that, that's fine. Just come back and dry brush back and forth, cross it a few times, and it'll blend it in. And this is one of the reasons you want to do it before it's completely dry, so if you have something happen like that, you can get a little bit of that wet to wet and actually brush it into the underlying paint, and then it will just look like some of that natural undertone.